Hi everyone, welcome to the IoT Heroes podcast. My name is Tom Raftery. I'm Global IoT Evangelist for SAP. And with me on the show today, I have...
Heino Kantimm.
Heino, thanks for coming on the show. Can you tell...
Thanks, Tom, for inviting me.
Not at all, not at all. It's great. Listen, can you tell, Heino, everyone, what is your role in SAP? What is it you do in SAP?
Sure. So my title is Chief Expert Connected Vehicles, and that sounds a little weird. So what it means is that I'm the global business lead for some of the solutions we have within our connected vehicles portfolio. So I take care of the business model aspects, I take care of the business cases at the beginning, and then also more from a business perspective, making it happen. So a lot of business development activities, partially sales activities, and other stuff to get it done. So everything that's not technology related.
Okay, good. And I mean, on this show, we've talked about several aspects of the Internet of Things in the last number of weeks, and we've had some really interesting conversations with different people. And one thing we haven't touched on, which is why I wanted you to come on the show, is the vehicles network, the connected vehicles, the whole IoT of transportation. So that's why I thought it'd be great to have you come on and talk to us a little bit about that. Now, the vehicles network, the SAP vehicles network, that's something that you're responsible for. So can you tell us? Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is it? Why is it? Where did it come from? What's the kind of thinking behind it?
Yeah, sure. You know, when people hear the term connected vehicles, they have many different things in mind, and similar to IoT at large. What we address with the vehicles network is from an IoT perspective, how to connect a car or people in the cars to hardware that or things that the car has to consume in some shape or form. That means a parking gate or a fueling gate. So all the things you do while you use your car and has some sort of interaction with other things. That's from an IoT perspective, the use case where we're coming from. So it's not so much the big data play and creating real-time logic and sense from all the data that's being collected from vehicles when they move, but it's really more like a user-centric perspective where from our side it's all about how to make the experience of the driver in a car more seamless and more delightful. That's on a high level, you know, what part of connected vehicles and what part of IoT we're addressing with the SAP Vehicles Network.
Okay. That's a very high level, as you say. Digging down a bit more into that, Heino, who are the customers for something like this? I mean, it's not me with my Prius outside the door. I wouldn't be buying an SAP Vehicles Network from you. Who is this being sold to, and what do they use it for?
Yeah, for us, from an SAP side, it's a new business model because it's what you typically call as B2B2C, and there are different type of customers. And as the name already implies, SAP Vehicles Network, it's a network business model. So that means we have a marketplace in the middle where SAP is providing the technology and where we also operate, and then we have a kind of a supply side and a demand side to that marketplace. And so SAP works with different type of companies who provide vehicle-centric services. One of them, or two examples of them, is parking, and another one is fueling, for example. So we want to make the parking and the fueling experience for the driver more delightful, as I mentioned before, and as such, we need to work with companies, so to say, on the supply side, who provide such services. That could be oil and gas companies, that could be people that provide access to parking, like parking operators, being it what we call off-street, like gated parking garages, or on-street in municipalities. That's the kind of the supply side, and these would be customers of SAP who offer their services, access to parking, access to fueling via the SAP Vehicles Network Marketplace. And on the other side, the demand side, so to speak, we would have companies, so also the B2B relationship from an SAP perspective, we would have companies who then again have access to end users, to drivers, that's the B2C part, who drive around in vehicles. And these channel-sided customers, B2B customers, could be, of course, automotive manufacturing companies, OEMs, who provide this service in the navigation system of their cars, for example. But it could also be, think about a rental car company who today has an app, and with that app you could search for places where you can pick up your car, you can place a reservation, and you do all kind of other things that you do in your rental car experience. And the idea is, why not using that same app to provide for the rental car company to provide their end customers also, access to convenient parking or convenient fueling. And specifically in that rental car scenario, you know how it is. You rent a car, and the last thing you need to do before you drop it off at the airport is you need to fill it up. So you might appreciate an experience that allows you to do this in a much faster and a much convenient way, and therefore that's, from our perspective, a typical kind of demand-side customer or member of the SAP Vehicles Network to take advantage of these type of services.
And of course, just before I drop it off at the airport, I wanted to find the cheapest petrol in the area closest to the airport so I can fill it up at the least cost to myself.
It's partially the cheapest, but when you think about it, it's not. You're actually not looking for the cheapest. You're looking for the closest or the one that allows you to do this in the fastest possible time. So yes, of course, knowing and understanding where to find a gas station and potentially also what the liter of gas costs. But what you really would appreciate is an experience where you don't have to get out of the car, get into the C-store at the end of or at the beginning of the fuel experience, depending on which country you're in, taking your credit card, queue in the line, wait for 5 minutes until it's your turn, and actually pay. Wouldn't it be nice to just use an app of your rental car company or the navigation system from the car manufacturer to authorize that fuel pump just right when you've done the fueling, and just get out and get away? And that's exactly what we mean by the Vehicles Network, to do a kind of a cross-industry or enable a cross-industry process where on one side you have the car experience, you sit as a driver in the car and do a fuel payment, you do a parking directly out of the car, so that it's a seamless process. And the Vehicles Network allows that interaction to take place. So back to your airport example, we do, or you would do yourself the best favor when you just say in the car, authorize that payment. I'm standing in front of pump number 4 and I want to have it paid now, and off you go.
So it's at least part of the functionality is it's like Apple Pay for your car.
Sure, payment is one certainly one important aspect out of it, because and that's one of the key differentiators or one of the key value propositions. It's not about just consuming information, like where to find parking or how much space is available at a certain garage, or in your example, fueling, where to find the cheapest one. This is all information. This is content where we believe that is difficult from a business model perspective to monetize that. We believe that as soon as you elevate that from a pure consumption of content perspective to do a real business transaction, like doing a parking, doing a fueling, which sure also then very often costs some money, then you effectively make the car kind of a sales channel for these type of services. And then, yes, of course, it needs to be paid. So you want to allow for a convenient payment process, but payment is not the only kind of value proposition or differentiator that we have in mind. That's one important aspect, but it's not the complete story.
Sure. Interesting. So there's a lot of stakeholders in this case for this kind of network. By the sounds of it, it's not just the OEM vehicle manufacturers, but it's also, as you say, the oil and gas companies, or hopefully the electricity companies when electric vehicles take off, or the parking. You know, there's a lot of people to become involved in this network. It must be difficult to generate a network effect in that scenario.
Oh yes, in fact that is the most difficult thing. The technology is manageable. You know, the technology is standardizing a business process, making sure we, towards the channel side, offer a standard API that allows them to conduct a parking service always in the same manner, no matter who the operator, no matter who the service provider is, and what kind of technology they have in place. So that's a question of standardizing business processes, creating APIs on one side and building connectors on the other side. That's all more or less doable. The real difficult question, to your point, is making sure that we have enough gravity, that we have people joining that network so that gravity can exist. And the more people you have that join that network, or the more companies you have that join that network, the more additional ones are being attracted. But the difficult point is indeed to achieve that critical mass in the first place, so that gravity can begin. And that's like with probably most or any other of these networks, that's the most difficult part, to get it off the ground.
Okay. And you mentioned parking specifically. I know you're also involved in the SAP Connected Parking solution. How does that connect into, if you want, the network, or does it, or is that something separate? And if so, why?
It's related. So when we pulled off the SAP Vehicles Network, and I just said, technology is easy. Conceptually, that's true. But the reality is that specifically when we talk about the parking industry, these guys are using a very old-fashioned technology. So you just think about when you parked the last time. And we're standing in front of the gate. You pulled down the window, you pressed a button, got some sort of paper ticket so that the gate opened and you could go in. Now, what we need to do is connect these type of systems to our marketplace to make this a seamless process. And the fact is that these systems are just not IoT enabled. Mm-hmm. Most of them are not today. In fact, I've seen some examples where it was just purely local setup, local installation, and there was a desktop underneath the table somewhere that was still running Windows 95, and that was enough. That was enough to manage that gate and that car park, but it's just not enough to connect it to the internet and create these kind of new experiences. And so we thought that the situation in the parking industry, digitalization needs to be kind of accelerated, and that's how we got into the concept of connected parking. When we said, look, what is it that it's not much you need to manage access to a car park and then do some electrical stuff to open a gate. It's not very difficult. And what's happened in the back end then to manage, to maintain timetables, to manage monthly or ad hoc parkers that get in, that you recognize. And then in the case of the ad hoc parking, you need to understand that when they were there for 2 or 3 hours, that this is the price it costs. It's not too difficult to do that. So what we did with connected parking was to actually build a cloud-based system, greenfield, that a parking operator could use to manage its car park. And we were partnering with some hardware companies, Samsung in this case, to create new hardware. In this case, a kiosk, an access kiosk, the thing you see when you pull down the window when you stand in front of the gate. Uh-huh. And from the SAP side, develop some software to do all this authentication and then, the management of your facility. We brought this together and created something that's now called SAP Connected Parking, which will allow an operator at a much lower cost in a much more flexible way to get his car park into the internet. And that's a way how we want to accelerate the digitalization in that industry, and also bring IoT really to the car parks to the degree where it is not happening today. And as I said, it's from our perspective going far too slowly.
Okay, and I suppose for something like this, the typical customers are the likes of municipalities or large parking companies that own fleets of parking estates across the country.
Yeah, it's both. In some, it's certainly the large private parking operators, but in many countries, parking is also still very much controlled by the municipalities themselves, who run their garages themselves. So in that case, we would also consider them as a customer. But it's everyone who operates a car park or who wants to. Already existing car parks are easy, but we see a lot of opportunity for turning space into a car park. Being this in a school or being this company facility where you have where you use a car park during daytime and Monday to Friday for your employees, but in the evenings or at the weekend it's more or less empty. So you could try to monetize that free space by making a public car park out of it. And today, these type of examples for sharing economy were not possible because installing such a traditional parking management system was simply too expensive. If you have one we call it one lane in and one lane out, and you need these kiosks, you need the gate, you need the software to run it. It's just far too expensive. So that it's worthwhile doing it. And with the solution we have in mind, we can create a much lower kind of an entry level technology that would allow these companies or schools or churches or whoever to use the technology and then really monetize such a space that it's not used in an affordable way.
And they don't need a barrier, and they don't need a kiosk and any of that stuff?
It depends. Sometimes when you have when you know your users, when you know your customers, and everyone is registered and known by a license plate, for example, and you only allow access to these type of customers, you wouldn't even need a kiosk. You wouldn't even need a gate. And all you need is some way to authenticate that car, and it could be all you need is a license plate reader, like with toll systems. You're authenticated. The system knows that you are a registered user. The system knows how to handle the payment, maybe then in a monthly basis instead of with every individual car park, and this is all you need. And in other cases, if you want to allow your customers your not known customers to still get in and then also pay for it on a transactions by transaction basis, you might need a kiosk, but then you also don't necessarily need paper tickets and a cash machine. If you have a credit card reader in there, for example, that might be perfectly sufficient, so that when you pull in the credit card, system validates that, the gate opens, and when you leave, you take the same credit card and pay for it at the kiosk. So there's different type of setups depending on the complexity of how you want to leverage your free space as a car park.
Interesting. And what about other solutions in this space, things like fleet management? Where does that fit in?
Fleet management is a little bit of a different IoT angle, and we started the conversation at the beginning, which is connected cars can mean different type of things, and managing a fleet has a different aspect of IoT, because there you want to know, you want to understand where your cars are. You want to understand if some of them are having issues right now with their engine, with something else. How many of them are really moving, how many of them are standing. So this is a typical type of scenario where you as a fleet operator want to get a real-time overview about all your vehicles and the conditions of their vehicles right now to be able to manage it better, to do some use cases like predictive maintenance, for example, knowing that things might happen before they happen, to be able to proactively fix those things. And these are the type of use cases that we also address in the larger connected vehicles, in the larger IoT umbrella. This is not my personal area of responsibilities. There's others team doing that within SAP. Solutions like SAP Vehicle Insights, for example, that address exactly these type of solutions and use cases.
Interesting. I know we're coming near the end of the show, and I'm just wondering, typically at the end of any of these kind of things, we kind of wonder what's coming down the line, what's in the future, where is this all going? I know one of the big topics at the moment in the transportation space or the connected vehicle space is around autonomy. What do you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years? I know that's a long landscape, but where do you think this is all going?
Well, that's a great question, and I think no one really knows. I mean,
very true.
Everyone knows autonomous driving will come.
Yeah.
What people argue is when. 5 to 10 years might still be a little too early for real autonomous driving, and then you need to very clearly distinguish between assisted driving, like what we're seeing on some of the roads and technologies today, versus true autonomous driving, where you have a car driving around with any driver sitting inside. And that can make a big difference into how traffic is being managed. There's so much going on that from attending all these different type of conferences and listening to thought leaders there, I do not believe that people have a clear understanding yet how things will change when we have autonomous driving truly happening without any driver. So, for example, will we then still need parking inside the cities in the traditional parking garages? Because your car could drive out somewhere where it's much cheaper, as an example. So, will autonomous driving lead to existing parking garages and enable cars to find their car park within that garage without a driver, or might you not need that garage at all? These are type of questions I believe are not solved yet. Another example is, people talk a lot about autonomous driving, but what that would allow you to do, and we hear some of these use cases, is that you would want to utilize your asset, your car, in a much better way. Today, most of the time, a car is standing and it's not driving. So how can you change that? And people think about, can I use then the car to do some delivery services, taking things from A to B while I'm sitting in the office? Now, as much as this is a nice idea, but the matter of the fact is that our roads will not become more. So you will create much more demand. There will be many more cars driving around, but the space for these cars will not increase. And from my personal perspective, that is something that will lead into a complete disaster for traffic. Now you stand in a traffic jam, and when you look around you, in most of the cars, there's only one person sitting in there and standing and waiting in the same way like you do. If you think about autonomous driving, you would even have more cars with no one sitting in there, which is even more annoying. So I think this whole concept of autonomous will only fly if you at the same time embed, or much stronger, focus on a sharing type of economy where you either through regulation or other shape of forms make sure that there's not too many cars driving alone without any driver, but you have 2 or 3, or you somehow bundle this, combine it, that you have more people in one car while others drive alone. You need to do something, and the autonomous flow, that you don't have this much acceleration or slowing down, which is causing many traffic jams, will not be sufficient. If we have 2 times, 3 times as many cars on the road because they all drive alone, you will not make traffic flow work with no technology on Earth. You need to find other ways to manage that.
Interesting. So the insurance industry is going to be heavily impacted by this. Do you see a time when it'll be more expensive to drive your car yourself rather than allowing the car to drive you?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, change of business model in the insurance industry through connected cars is already happening today. And with usage-based insurance, pay as you drive, pay per distance, that's already happening. If you think about the scenario, as you mentioned, when we have autonomous driving, real autonomous driving, from my understanding, it's a huge threat to the insurance industry, because 90% or something, I'm not sure about the exact numbers, but 90% of the accidents are caused by human mistakes. If you take that out of the equation, you're just not. You don't have any accidents anymore. Of course, today what you see in the news is accidents happening through autonomous vehicles, and even sometimes, unfortunately, fatal accidents. So this is what's how insurance is related to autonomous driving today. But when it's really happening, the fact is that you will have much less accidents, and I believe this is putting a lot of pressure to the business model of the insurance companies. So it could be that, some of them might go out of business. It could be that the remaining accidents might get more expensive, or the premiums get more expensive. Otherwise, the insurance companies cannot survive. But I think, this is one of these examples where we know what is going to happen, but we're not yet clear about the impact and how it will change, in this case, the insurance business model.
Yeah. William Gibson, the science fiction author, has a great quote that you just reminded me of, where he says, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." And I think that's yeah. I think that's very much the case. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Heino, we've run out of time. That's been fantastic. Thanks a million for coming on the show. It's been really, really interesting. And we'll have another show in another week's time. But in the meantime, have a great day, and thanks again for joining us.
Great. Perfect. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity for this conversation. It was great fun. Thanks, Tom.